Okay, in this video, I want to cover this mini financial reporting scheme that I created for testing purposes. So here is where you can find the information, and this is an actual website right here, and you can download all the files and use the entire website. So this reporting scheme is built on the ideas that I've been working up to on this accounting equation, SFAC 6, elements of financial statements, and common elements of financial statements. It has two purposes. Number one is to test the report creation and extraction to make sure that it works as expected. And number two, to both understand and demonstrate all the moving parts that you have to have for a reporting scheme to make it work correctly. So these reports are robust reports. They look like financial reports. I mean, they're smaller than financial reports, but the thing is, I'm doing this stuff that is necessary to get all this right. So if you look through these, you notice how all these roll-ups are green? That's because they add up correctly. And I have this for every single mathematical computation in this set of reports. And I have details, the primary financial statements. I have text blocks for the disclosures, the notes, and I have a reporting checklist. So this is actually a bug. I do have my accounting policies. There they are. And here are the disclosure mechanics for all these. And again, these are bugs right here. And I'm helping this developer get all this stuff correct. And so it's a fairly robust report. And I can prove that everything in this report is created correctly. And I did create everything correctly. And then I basically duplicated the reports so that I had multiple copies, and I used that as the basis for this repository. Okay, so let's see, where am I? Yeah, here's the repository. So I have in this all the pieces that you need to create a report that is properly functioning. So I talk about disclosures. There's all the disclosures. So I'm going to skip these topics, templates, and exemplars. Those are like gravy. I don't need that. These are the terms that are in the taxonomy. This is the references to the authoritative literature. These are the fundamental concepts, reporting styles, the networks where you build your structures, the properties, classes, consistency rules, and rules to derive information for line items that have not been reported. So then here are the instance documents. So for each instance document, I have a human readable version of the information that you can go to and use that. I have the instance document, and I have inline XBRL, which I don't need, because whether or not you take a fact and then map it to an inline document presentation, the underlying facts have to be, the meaning conveyed has to be correct. So here, the inline XBRL is actually auto-generated, but this is actually inline XBRL. So I'm going to go back here to the taxonomy, and I'm going to grab this Excel spreadsheet that I use to extract information from those documents that I created. So, and here's that. So I'm going to get to this in a second. There's one error in this. So these first 5 are all correct, which is planned, and then this one has an error, which was also planned. So how do you pull information into the Excel spreadsheet? So I'm going to show you that. you basically go into the Excel and the Developer tab, go into Visual Basic, and you see in this module, you see all this stuff. And if you're a developer, you can go through this and step through it and see exactly how this is done. But I'm going to use the balance sheet and show you what you have to do. So basically, you want to populate an Excel spreadsheet. So first you have to know what information you're after. Let's say I want assets. So there's that variable. Okay, you have to know which concept to use to grab that information out of the instance document. So there's that concept. Sometimes you may need to use the fact could have been reported by any number of concepts. So for example, in the US GAAP taxonomy, they have two concepts that mean exactly the same thing. One is US GAAP net income loss, which is net income attributable to parent. And the other one is US GAAP income available to parent, which is for partnerships. So basically one is intended for corporations, one is intended for partnerships. So, and that's how it's mostly used, but people make mistakes sometimes, and they mess that up, so you have to deal with that. And you have to do this for every concept that you want to pull, because just because you get something out of a taxonomy doesn't mean you know what it is. Computers are dumb, and just because you're pointing to something, you don't know that it's necessarily what it is. You have to know what you're working with in some manner. Okay, so the second thing that can happen, so you get the elements that are there. The second thing that you need to deal with is the things that are not there. Basically, the line items that are not reported that you want to deal with. So for example, a common line item that is not reported is non-current assets. Some companies report it, some companies don't report it. So if it's not reported, you can derive it. How do you do that? Well, if it has the value assets and it has the value of non-current assets, then you just subtract non-current assets from assets and you get non-current assets. Okay, so you can do this for all the high-level line items that you have to work with that might not have been explicitly reported. The next thing you do is you have to verify that the information you got is correct, because either the reporting entity could have made a mistake or your algorithm could have made a mistake. You cannot just arbitrarily send software against a report and then pull and use whatever the heck you get. You have to make sure that what you're getting is correct. Okay, so to do this, we do these consistency checks. For example, here's one. Current assets plus non-current assets equals assets. So this, what I'm doing is this actually subtracting. So the total of this should equal the total of that. But if you take this and subtract it, then you should get 0. So the values of all these rules should be 0. You'll see why I did that in the spreadsheet. So then you put the things in the spreadsheet and you put the values of the tests in the spreadsheet. And so here's the spreadsheet, and here's where the values go, and you can see why I'm looking for 0, because if I find that the rule is working, I say that it's 0, so I know that it's working correctly. And then here are the actual values that were reported. So what's up with this? Well, what happened is, in this case, I intentionally used the concept non-current assets incorrectly in another disclosure other than the balance sheet. So this is a common error in US GAAP filings. They have two concepts. One is US GAAP assets non-current. The other is US GAAP non-current assets. It's like, yeah, it's goofy, but that's what they have. Okay, the second one, US GAAP non-current assets, is actually, the label is long-lived assets. And that is intended to be used in the segment disclosure to disclose long-lived assets. And long-lived assets and non-current assets are not necessarily the same. So you have people using the wrong concept, and so they have a contradiction. They say that non-current assets is something per their balance sheet, but they don't actually put the line item in there. Then they use that line item elsewhere, and they have a contradiction. And there are, this is only one way that this stuff can go wrong. There are many, many others, and you have to manage all of this stuff in order to have your system work correct. But the primary point is, how do you know that all this stuff works? This is very detailed unless you test it. And that's what I did. All this stuff, that's how I figured out that all these things are necessary in order to have that dashboard be correct in all cases. You have to test all this stuff to make sure that there are no errors, and it doesn't matter whether it's just this mini scheme, reporting scheme, or US GAAP or IFRS or anybody else that creates XBRL based reports. This is science, and that's how it works, and that's what you need to do to make sure that your taxonomy and the people that create documents that work against your taxonomy work correctly. So I'm going to stop there for now.